Every morning, James Connor walks past the same homeless man outside his office building. Despite struggling to raise his daughter on a tight budget, James always shares his breakfast, a warm bagel and coffee. He doesn't know much about the quiet man who accepts his kindness with a gentle smile. He doesn't know that this man is Michael Sterling, the CEO of James's company, who has been secretly watching his employees from the streets. Now on Christmas Eve, James is about to lose his job in company-wide layoffs. But sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can change everything. As the snow falls over Chicago, one question remains. Will James's compassion be enough to save not just his job, but his family's future? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The alarm chirped at 5:30 a.m., but James Connor was already awake. He lay in his bed, staring at the water stain on the ceiling, the one the landlord kept promising to fix, and listened to the quiet sounds of early morning Chicago filtering through thin apartment walls. A passing L train rattled the windows, right on schedule. "Daddy!" Emma's sleepy voice came from the doorway. She stood there in her two small frozen pajamas, clutching the stuffed penguin her mother had given her on her 5th birthday. At 8, she was getting too old for it, but some things you don't let go of. "Hey, sweetheart, you're up early." James patted the bed beside him, and Emma crawled in, her dark curls tickling his chin as she snuggled close. These quiet morning moments were sacred. A time when he could almost pretend everything was normal, that Sarah wasn't gone, that their world hadn't shrunk to just the two of them 3 years ago. Their morning routine was a carefully choreographed dance in the tiny kitchen. Emma set out bowls while James measured cereal, saving the last of the milk for her. He made his coffee strong and poured it into a thermos, along with a second cup that Emma knew wasn't for him. "Is it for the nice man again?" she asked, watching him pack 2 bagels into a paper bag. "Mr. John, yes." James hadn't known what to call the quiet homeless man who'd appeared outside Meridian's building 2 months ago, so he'd settled on John. The man had never corrected him. While Emma dressed for school, James quickly ironed his one good work shirt. The cuffs were starting to fray, but with his dark blue tie and carefully polished shoes, he could still look professional. Appearance mattered at Meridian, especially lately, with rumors of restructuring floating through the office. Through the window, he watched the city wake up. Christmas lights still twinkled in neighboring windows, a reminder of the holiday season that brought both joy and anxiety. This year had been harder than most, but he was determined to make it special for Emma. "Ready?" Emma emerged from her room wearing her school uniform, hair neatly braided, a skill James had mastered through countless YouTube tutorials after Sarah died. She grabbed her backpack, the one they'd found at a thrift store, and decorated together with iron-on patches to hide the worn spots. As they headed out into the cold Chicago morning, James held Emma's hand tight, treasuring these simple moments that meant everything. The walk to Emma's school took them past neighborhood shops just opening for the day. Christmas decorations sparkled in windows, and holiday music drifted from cafe doors. Emma skipped ahead, pointing out her favorite displays, while James's hand stayed firmly wrapped around her carefully written Christmas list in his pocket. He'd found it in her backpack last week, written in neat 3rd-grade handwriting on paper decorated with hand-drawn candy canes. Each item felt like a small knife in his heart. "New winter coat, pink please. Art set with real paints, bike, used is okay. Ballet lessons like Katie has." Outside Chen's market, Mr. Chen was setting up his produce stand. "Merry Christmas, James." "Emma," he called out, "special price on oranges today." James checked his wallet, knowing exactly what he'd find. $5, carefully set aside for tomorrow's breakfast bagels. "Maybe later, Mr. Chen. Thanks." The old grocer's eyes softened with understanding. He quickly selected 2 perfect clementines and held them out to Emma. "Here, for my favorite customer. Try these." Before James could protest, Emma had the fruit. clutched to her chest, beaming. "Thank you, Mr. Chen. Look how orange they are." As they continued their walk, Emma chatted about her upcoming Christmas presentation at school. "Everyone's sharing their family traditions," she explained. "I'm going to tell them about Mom's paper snowflakes." James squeezed her hand, remembering Sarah's delicate creations that would transform their windows each December. Even in their final Christmas together, week from treatments, she'd insisted on making them. "Some traditions," she'd whispered, "are too important to let go." At the school gates, Emma hugged him fiercely. "You'll be there for my presentation, right, at 2 o'clock? "Cross my heart," James promised, making their special X gesture over his chest. He watched her disappear into the building, then pulled out her Christmas list again. The junior accountant position at Meridian Enterprises barely covered their rent and groceries. Sarah's medical bills had drained their savings, and now, with rumors of company restructuring, he pushed the thought away. There had to be a way to make at least some of Emma's wishes come true. Walking toward Meridian's towering office building, James calculated and recalculated their budget. Maybe he could pick up weekend work at Chen's, market, or sell his watch. Sarah's last anniversary gift to him, but she would have understood. Lost in thought, he almost missed the quiet figure in his usual spot by the employee entrance. Mr. John sat reading a worn paperback, his posture dignified despite his weathered clothes. "Good morning, Mr. John." James held out the paper bag and coffee. "Emma says hello." The man accepted the offerings with a gentle nod. "You seem troubled today, James." "More than usual." Something about John's careful observation made James pause. "Just Christmas challenges, trying to make it special for Emma." "Ah." John's eyes held surprising warmth. "Sometimes the most special gifts aren't the ones we buy." "Try telling that to an 8-year-old who just wants to take ballet lessons like her friends." John was quiet for a moment, sipping his coffee. "Your daughter, she's the one doing the presentation about paper snowflakes today." James startled. Had he mentioned that? But before he could ask, his phone buzzed with a meeting reminder. "I have to run. Stay warm out here." As he hurried inside, he missed the thoughtful look that crossed John's face, and the way the supposedly homeless man pulled out an expensive phone, dialing a number with practiced ease. "Yes," John, or rather Michael Sterling, said softly. "About that arts program we discussed. I think I found our first scholarship recipient." Michael Sterling had learned more sitting on a cold sidewalk for 2 months than he had in 20 years of board meetings. From his spot by the employee entrance, bundled in carefully weathered clothes, he watched the daily parade of lives that made up Meridian Enterprises. Each morning brought its cast of characters: Martinez, the security guard, who saved coffee for the night shift workers; Susan from payroll, quietly paying for other people's lunches when they ran short; and James Connor, who shared his breakfast with a stranger despite barely having enough for himself. Today, Sterling observed James's retreating form with particular interest. The worn edges of his coat, the careful way he handled his coffee thermos, these small details spoke volumes. But it was the Christmas list he'd seen James reading that truly caught his attention. The way the man's shoulders had slumped while looking at it told a story all too familiar. Pulling out his phone, a model far too expensive for his current appearance, Sterling checked his messages. The board was pushing hard for the restructuring, demanding cuts before year's end. His own daughter's words from their last conversation echoed in his mind. "Dad, you've forgotten what Meridian used to stand for." Had he? 25 years ago, he'd started this company with a vision of building something meaningful. Back then, he'd known every employee's name, their stories, their dreams. Somewhere along the way, after his wife's death, people had become numbers on spreadsheets. A group of employees hurried past, their conversation carrying on the cold air. "Did you hear? The cuts are happening today. Christmas Eve, that's heartless. That's business." Sterling's jaw tightened. Was this what his company had become, what he had become? He thought of his daughter Claire, now living in Paris with her family. When was the last time he'd seen his grandchildren? Called just to talk. He'd buried himself in acquisition reports and profit margins, using grief as an excuse to disconnect from everything that mattered. The morning crowd thinned, leaving him alone with his thoughts and his worn copy of King Lear, a deliberate choice of reading material. A story about a powerful man who lost sight of what truly mattered, who needed to lose everything to see clearly again. His phone buzzed. Another message from the board, demanding confirmation of the layoff schedule. Instead of responding, he opened a different contact. Claire. Ma chérie, he typed, then paused. What could he say to bridge years of distance? Finally, I think I'm finally understanding what you tried to tell me. Would you and the family like to come for Christmas? I have some things I need to make right. Her response came quickly. Really? What's changed? Sterling looked up at the towering glass building bearing his name, then at the simple paper bag that had held James's shared breakfast. I've been learning some important lessons, he wrote back, from a man who has very little but knows the value of everything. He stood, brushing off his weathered coat. It was time to make some changes, starting with a certain Christmas list and a young girl's dream of ballet lessons. But first, he had a school presentation to attend. After all, he thought with a smile, some traditions are too important to let go. The Meridian Enterprises building hummed with nervous energy. James stepped off the elevator onto the 14th floor, where the accounting department had grown unusually quiet. Conversations stopped as he passed, replaced by meaningful glances and hushed whispers. At his desk, a red memo slip caught his eye. Mandatory department meeting, 2 p.m., conference room A. His heart sank. Emma's presentation was at the same time. Connor, Bill Hayes, his supervisor, appeared at his cubicle. Got a minute? In Bill's office, the tension was palpable. The older man wouldn't meet his eyes, fingers drumming nervously on a stack of papers. Look, James, you're a good worker, and everyone knows your situation with your daughter. Bill, what's going on? Corporate's moving fast on this restructuring. The board's demanding immediate action. Bill lowered his voice. I shouldn't be telling you this, but you might want to update your resume. James felt the floor tilt beneath him. They're cutting jobs before Christmas. It's coming from the top. Nobody's even seen Sterling in months. Man's gone completely reclusive since his wife died. Bill shook his head. The meeting at 2. I can't, James interrupted. My daughter's school presentation. James. Bill's voice was heavy with regret. You really can't miss this one. Back at his desk, James stared at his computer screen without seeing it. The Christmas list in his pocket felt heavier than ever. How could he tell Emma that not only would he miss her presentation, but they might be losing their income? Susan from payroll stopped by, her face drawn with concern. James, is it true about the meeting? He nodded, not trusting his voice. It's not right, she whispered. Making cuts on Christmas Eve. The Michael Sterling I used to know would never have allowed this. Used to know? I've been here since the beginning. He was different then, knew everyone's names, their families. After his wife died, she trailed off, noticing Martinez, the security guard, approaching. Mr. Connor? Martinez held out a paper. In cup. Your friend asked me to bring you this. Said you looked like you could use it. The coffee was from the expensive cafe down the street, not the usual break-room brew. A message was written on the cup in familiar, careful handwriting. Sometimes, the hardest choices lead us back to what matters most. James frowned. How had John afforded premium coffee, and why did his handwriting look so similar to the signature on the memo about the department meeting? Before he could ponder this further, his phone buzzed with a text from Emma's teacher. Emma's so excited about her presentation. She's been practicing all morning. The photo attached showed Emma standing proudly next to a display of paper snowflakes, her smile so much like Sarah's that it hurt. She had arranged them just as her mother used to, with the light catching, the intricate patterns. James looked at the memo again, then at Emma's photo. In his mind, he heard Sarah's voice. Some promises can't be broken. Standing up, he made his decision. Martinez, If anyone asks, I had an important appointment that couldn't be rescheduled. The security guard smiled knowingly. Family first, right? Don't worry, I'll cover for you. As James headed for the elevator, he passed the photo in the lobby he'd seen 100 times before, Michael Sterling accepting some business award. He paused, really looking at it for the first time. The distinguished grey beard, the observant eyes, the way the man stood. But no, that was impossible. His mind was playing tricks on him, wasn't it? Ms. Rodriguez's third-grade classroom was a riot of holiday decorations. Paper chains draped from the ceiling, student artwork covered the walls, and a small artificial tree twinkled in the corner. Parents were already filling the chairs set. Up at the back of the room, when James slipped in, his heart racing from the brisk walk. Emma hadn't seen him yet. She sat at her desk, carefully arranging her paper snowflakes, wearing the same look of concentration Sarah used to have when working. On her art, the resemblance made his throat tight. "I wasn't sure you'd make it," Miss Rodriguez whispered, appearing beside him. "Emma mentioned something about an important meeting." "This is more important." James watched as Katie Miller, in her brand-new holiday dress, described her family's annual ski trip to Aspen. Emma sat quietly, fingers nervously tracing the edges of her snowflakes. "She's been practicing all week," Ms. Rodriguez said softly. "Yesterday, she told everyone about how her mom taught you both the special technique for folding them." The memory hit him hard. Sarah, sitting at their kitchen table 3 Christmases ago, demonstrating the precise folds. "See, Emma, each one is unique, just like you." She'd already been sick then, but determined to make that Christmas magical. Finally, it was Emma's turn. She stood slowly, gathering her courage along with her snowflakes. When she spotted James in the back, her whole face lit up with Sarah's smile. "My name is Emma Connor," she began, voice small but growing stronger. "And I'm going to talk about my family's Christmas tradition of making paper snowflakes." She held up her first creation, delicately cut into an intricate pattern. "My mom taught us how to make these. She said that even though real snowflakes melt away, paper ones can last forever, just like memories." James noticed a figure appear in the doorway, a distinguished-looking man in an expensive suit. Something about him seemed familiar, but Emma was speaking again, and James couldn't look away. "Every December we make snowflakes together. Even though Mom isn't here anymore, Daddy and I keep making them, exactly the way she taught us. Because some traditions are too important to let go." In that moment, James knew without doubt that he'd made the right choice. Even if it cost him his job, being here for this moment was worth everything. "I made one for each of you," Emma continued, moving around the room with her creations. "They're all different because that's what makes them special, just like people." When she reached James, she gave him an extra-large snowflake. "This one's special, Daddy. Look closely. There, cut into the delicate paper, were dozens of tiny hearts, Sarah's signature touch." James blinked back tears as Emma returned to the front of the room. "Mom always said that love is like a snowflake. It might look simple at first, but when you look closer, you see all the patterns that connect everything together." The man in the doorway stepped forward slightly, and this time James recognized him. Michael Sterling, CEO of Meridian Enterprises, was watching Emma's presentation with an expression of profound understanding. Their eyes met briefly across the classroom. In that moment, James saw not his boss, not the feared CEO, but simply another father who recognized the importance of being present for these precious moments. Sterling nodded once, then slipped away as quietly as he'd come. In his place appeared a small envelope with James's name on it. He would read it later, after Emma's presentation, after the proud hugs and congratulations. For now, he simply sat in that classroom, surrounded by paper snowflakes and memories, knowing that whatever came next, he was exactly where he needed to be. The envelope felt heavy in James's pocket as he walked back to Meridian Enterprises. Snow had started falling, real snowflakes dancing in the afternoon air, each one unique like the paper ones Emma had so carefully crafted. The security desk was empty, unusual for this time of day. But James's keycard still worked. The elevator ride to the 14th floor seemed longer than usual. He'd expected to find angry messages, maybe even a formal termination notice. Instead, his phone showed a single text from Bill Hayes. Executive conference room now. The executive floor was another world. Thick carpets, original artwork, solid oak doors. James had only been here once before during his initial interview, 5 years ago. Now, heart-pounding, he pushed open the conference room door. Michael Sterling sat at the head of the table, no longer in his CEO suit, but dressed in the familiar weathered clothes of Mr. John. The contrast was startling against the room's luxury. "Please sit down, Mr. Connor." The voice was John's, but refined, stripped of its street-corner roughness. "We have much to discuss." James sank into a chair, his mind spinning. "You, all this time?" "Yes." "Sterling, John." Mr. Sterling smiled slightly. "I've spent the past 2 months learning about my company, not from reports or meetings, but from watching people like you. People who understand what really matters." He gestured to the stack of papers on the table. These were meant to be termination notices. 43 positions eliminated, just in time for Christmas. A decision made by people looking at spreadsheets, instead of faces. With deliberate care, Sterling tore the stack in half. The sound echoed in the silent room. "When my wife died, I lost my way. Buried myself in numbers, forgot about the human side of business. It took watching you, day after day, sharing what little you had, to remind me of what Meridian was meant to be." James thought of all their morning conversations, seeing them in a new light. The story about missing your daughter's recital. "Claire, she lives in Paris now, rarely calls." Sterling's eyes held decades of regret. "But after watching your presentation today, I called her. She's flying in tomorrow with her family." He pulled out the familiar worn business card, his first, with the Compass Rose logo containing tiny hidden hearts. "My wife designed this, like Sarah's snowflakes. Sometimes we need reminders of what we've forgotten." "Why tell me all this?" "Because I'm offering you a new position, Director of Employee Relations and Community Engagement. Someone who understands that a company's true value isn't measured in profit margins, but in the lives it touches." James stared at him, speechless. "The salary is substantial," Sterling continued. "Enough to cover ballet lessons, art supplies, and a college fund for Emma. But more importantly, it's a chance to help rebuild Meridian's soul." Through the window, James could see the spot where he'd shared so many morning conversations with a man he thought was homeless. "One condition," he said finally. Sterling raised an eyebrow. "The employee emergency fund you mentioned. I want it named after Sarah. The Sarah Connor Memorial Fund." "Done." Sterling stood, extending his hand. "Welcome to the new Meridian. James, go home to your daughter. Tell her those paper snowflakes of hers helped change a company's heart." As James left the conference room, he heard Sterling on the phone. "Claire? Yes, everything's set for tomorrow, and I was thinking maybe we could make paper snowflakes with the kids. I learned from someone who knows all about keeping traditions alive." James found Emma waiting outside her classroom, carefully packing her remaining snowflakes into a folder Ms. Rodriguez had given her. Other parents were leaving with their children, some still wiping tears from their eyes after the presentations. "Daddy, did you see? Did you like the hearts in the snowflakes?" Emma bounced on her toes, excitement making her eyes shine. "They were perfect, sweetheart, just like Mom used to make." He knelt down to her level. "I have some news to share. Remember Mr. John?" Emma nodded. "The nice man you give breakfast to? Well, it turns out he's not really homeless. He's actually—" James paused, still processing it himself. "He's my boss, the owner of my company, and he offered me a very special job." Emma's face scrunched in confusion. "But why was he pretending to be homeless?" Sometimes, James said carefully, people need to look at things differently to understand what's really important. Mr. John, Mr. Sterling, learned something from watching how people treated him when they thought he had nothing. Like how you shared your breakfast? Exactly. And now he wants me to help make the company a better place, a place that helps people like Mom always taught us to do. They walked through the snowy streets, Emma skipping beside him asking questions about his new job. Outside Chen's market, Mr. Chen was closing up early for Christmas Eve. "James! Emma! Wait!" He hurried out with a paper bag. "Special Christmas dinner ingredients. No arguments," he added as James started to protest. "I heard about your promotion. My nephew texted from Meridian." Inside the bag, James found all the ingredients for Sarah's traditional Christmas Eve pasta, even the special olive oil she'd always splurged on. "Mum's recipe," Emma whispered, peering into the bag. "Can we make it, like she showed us?" "Of course we can." James turned to thank Mr. Chen, but the old grocer was already heading inside, waving off their gratitude with a smile. At home, they found another surprise waiting. A large box sat outside their apartment door, wrapped in silver paper with a note, "Some traditions deserve the best tools. Ems." Emma tore open the package to find the professional art set from her Christmas list, along with a pink winter coat, and an envelope containing a year's worth of ballet lessons at the city's best dance academy. "But how did he know?" she gasped. James thought of all those morning conversations with John, realizing how carefully the CEO had been listening, planning, understanding. "He learned to see what matters," James said simply. "Just like Mom always tried to teach us." They spent the evening cooking Sarah's pasta recipe, Emma reading the instructions from her mother's handwritten recipe card, while James followed them exactly. The apartment filled with familiar scents that brought back 1,000 memories. "Do you think Mom would be proud?" Emma asked as they sat down to eat. "Of my presentation and everything?" James looked at their small table, the pasta made with love, the paper snowflakes dancing in the window, his daughter's eyes bright with hope for the future. "She'd be so proud, sweetheart. Of both of us." After dinner, as Emma practiced her ballet poses in her new coat, James noticed one more envelope that had fallen from the package. Inside was a note in Sterling's careful handwriting. "Today, your daughter taught me more about leadership than 20 years of business school. Sometimes we need to look through a child's eyes to see what really matters. Thank you for sharing your breakfast, your stories, and your wisdom with a lost old man who needed to remember his own heart. P.S. Claire and her family would love to join you both for Christmas dinner tomorrow. She says her kids could use some lessons in making proper paper snowflakes." In his penthouse office atop Meridian Enterprises, Michael Sterling stood at the window watching the snow fall over Chicago. The city lights twinkled below, reminding him of Christmas lights from his daughter's childhood. His phone buzzed with another message from Claire. "Just boarded in Paris. See you in 10 hours, Papa." He smiled at the papa. She hadn't called him that in years. On his desk lay the worn clothes he'd worn as John, now neatly folded beside the company's original business plan. The contrast between them told the story of how far he'd strayed from his original vision. The board members had been apoplectic when he announced the changes. No layoffs, holiday bonuses for everyone, a complete restructuring of the company's priorities. "This isn't good business," they'd argued. "No," he'd replied, thinking of James sharing his breakfast, of Emma's paper snowflakes. "This is better than business. This is humanity." Martinez appeared at his door. "Sir, the decorators are here about tomorrow." Sterling nodded. After seeing the simple beauty of Emma's presentation, he'd cancelled the expensive corporate Christmas. Decorators. Instead, he'd asked Martinez to bring in craft paper and scissors. "My grandchildren are coming," he explained. "I think it's time they learned about making paper snowflakes." He picked up the Compass Rose logo his wife had designed, tracing the tiny hearts hidden in the pattern. How had he forgotten these details? The same way he'd forgotten to call Claire on her birthday, missed his grandson's first steps, buried himself in acquisition reports instead of family photos. But today, watching Emma Connor share her family's tradition, something had shifted. He'd seen himself in her story, not as the successful CEO, but as the father who'd nearly lost everything that mattered while chasing things that didn't. His assistant appeared with another update. "Sir, Mr. Connor's new office is being prepared, and the Sarah Connor Memorial Fund paperwork is ready for your signature." "Thank you, Linda." He paused. "And the other thing?" She smiled. "The ballet academy was thrilled to offer Emma a scholarship. They're keeping a spot open." Looking out at the snowy city again, Sterling thought about transformations, how a simple paper snowflake could become something magical with the right cuts and folds, how a company could rediscover its heart, how a father could find his way. Back to what matters. The sun was setting on Christmas Eve, painting the sky in colors that reminded him of Claire's childhood drawings, the ones that used to cover his old office walls before he'd replaced them with stock certificates and awards. Tomorrow, he would have breakfast with his daughter for the first time in 7 years. They would make paper snowflakes with her children, start new traditions while honoring old ones. And maybe, just maybe, he would finally understand what James Connor had known all along, that the truest measure of success isn't in what you have, but in what you're willing to share when you have little to give. The news spread through Meridian Enterprises like wildfire. Susan from payroll heard it first from Martinez, who'd helped Sterling carry craft supplies to the executive floor. Bill Hayes got the call from HR about canceling the layoffs. By sunset, on Christmas Eve, the entire building was buzzing with the story. "Did you hear? Sterling's been disguised as a homeless man for 2 months. They say Connor's been feeding him breakfast every morning without knowing who he was." The board's furious about cancelling the restructuring, but Sterling told them to stuff it. In the break room, employees gathered around as Susan shared what she knew. "I was here when Meridian first started," she told them. "Michael Sterling used to bring his daughter to the office. Claire would draw pictures for everyone. We had this whole wall covered in children's art." Bill Hayes shook his head in wonder. "Hard to believe that's the same man who's been running the company like a machine these past few years." "No," Susan corrected him. "Hard to believe he finally remembered who he used to be." The maintenance crew reported that Sterling's executive office was being transformed. The modern abstract art was coming down, replaced by family photos and children's drawings pulled from storage. The expensive corporate Christmas decorations had been donated to a local shelter, replaced by paper snowflakes that employees' children had been invited to make. Even the company's mission statement was changing. The new version posted in the lobby read, "Building tomorrow through people, because every person has value and every act of kindness matters." Martinez smiled as he passed it each time. He'd been the first to recognize Sterling during his weeks as John, but had kept the secret, understanding that some lessons could only be learned from the ground up. Now, watching the company transform, he thought about all the small kindnesses he'd witnessed over the years. The cleaning crew, staying late to help a stressed employee. The IT team fixing personal laptops for free. James Connor sharing his breakfast every morning. "Sometimes," he told the night shift crew, "it takes seeing yourself through others' eyes to remember who you really are." Outside, the Christmas Eve snow continued to fall, each flake unique, each one part of something larger. Just like the people inside Meridian Enterprises, who were beginning to remember that they were more than just employees. They were part of a family that had lost its way, but was finally finding its way back home. Emma sat cross-legged on their living room floor, surrounded by art supplies from her new set. She was carefully crafting a special snowflake, her tongue sticking out slightly in concentration, just like Sarah used to do when working on a particularly detailed piece. "This one's for Mr. Sterling's grandchildren," she explained, cutting another precise pattern. "Since they're coming tomorrow, they should have something special for their first Christmas here." James watched her from the kitchen, where he was finishing the dishes from their pasta dinner. The apartment smelled like Sarah's sauce recipe, and for the first time in years, the scent brought more comfort than pain. His phone buzzed with another message from Sterling. Claire's plane lands at 6 a.m. She insists on helping with the French toast. Says it's been too long since she cooked in someone else's kitchen. The idea of the CEO's daughter in their modest kitchen should have been awkward, but somehow it felt right. After all, Sterling had spent 2 months sitting on a cold sidewalk, sharing simple breakfasts and conversations. A knock at the door revealed Ms. Rodriguez carrying a box of ornaments. "These were gathering dust in my attic," she said. "When Emma mentioned your tree could use some more decorations." Emma rushed over, eyes wide at the vintage glass bowls and delicate angels. "They look like the ones in Mom's old pictures." "That's because they're from the same era," Ms. Rodriguez smiled. "My grandmother's collection. They should be enjoyed, not stored away." As they decorated the tree, more neighbors stopped by. Mr. Chen brought fresh oranges and pastries. Martinez dropped off a handmade star for the top of the tree, crafted from recycled security badges. Each visitor added something to their evening, turning their small apartment into a warm gathering place. "It's like Mom always said," Emma observed, carefully hanging an ornament. "Christmas magic isn't about what you have, it's about what you share." James thought about all the mornings he'd shared his breakfast with John, never realizing he was helping a man who had everything but had forgotten what mattered most. "Your mom was very wise," he told Emma, "and she'd be so proud of how you're sharing her wisdom with others." After everyone left, they stood admiring their transformed tree. The vintage ornaments sparkled alongside Emma's paper snowflakes, each one catching the light in its own unique way. "Daddy?" Emma asked, her voice sleepy. "Do you think Mr. Sterling's grandchildren will like me?" "Of course they will, sweetheart. How could they not? Even though we don't have a big house or fancy things." James knelt down to her level. "Today, you taught a CEO, one of the most powerful men in Chicago, about what really matters in life. You showed him that the most valuable things can't be bought. That's worth more than any fancy house." Emma smiled, then yawned. "Can we leave out paper and scissors for them? In case they want to learn how to make snowflakes right away." "That's a wonderful idea." As he tucked her into bed later, James noticed she'd propped her latest snowflake creation on her bedside table. In the center, she'd somehow managed to cut out the words "family found" out of the mouths of babes, he thought. Tomorrow would bring new beginnings for all of them, not just a new job or new opportunities, but a new kind of family, built not on wealth or status, but on the simple acts of kindness that had brought them all together. Late that Christmas Eve, after Emma had fallen asleep, James sat at their small kitchen table with a notepad, planning his new role at Meridian. The Sarah Connor Memorial Fund would need guidelines, application processes, a way to ensure help reach those who needed it most. His phone lit up with a message from Bill Hayes. "Just heard about the promotion. Should have known you'd land on your feet. Listen, about some of our employees who could use help." Bill's message was followed by others. Susan from payroll had a list of single parents struggling with childcare costs. Martinez knew of 3. Maintenance workers taking extra shifts to cover medical bills. Even Mr. Chen texted about his nephew in the mailroom, hoping to take night classes. James wrote down every name, every story. This was what Sterling had seen from his spot on the sidewalk, the hidden struggles, the quiet dignity, the way people helped each other, even when they had little to give. He opened his laptop, creating a new document titled "Building Tomorrow." Through People, Action Plan. Under it, he listed his first initiatives: Employee Emergency Fund, the Sarah Connor Memorial Fund, Children's Education Scholarship Program, flexible work hours for parents, skills development grants, community outreach. Programs at the bottom, he added a note: Success measured not in profits, but in lives improved. A soft knock at the door interrupted his planning. It was Martinez, off his shift, but still in uniform. "Sorry to bother you so late," he said, "but I thought you should see this." He handed James a stack of papers, requests for volunteer time, offers to teach skills, suggestions for community projects. The employees of Meridian weren't just waiting for change, they were ready to be part of it. We've always looked out for each other, Martinez explained. Now we finally have a way to do it officially. James added another section to his document. Employee-led initiatives. After all, who better to understand what people needed than those who lived it every day? Looking at Emma's snowflakes dancing in the window, he thought about patterns, how small, individual acts of kindness could connect to create something larger, more beautiful than the sum of its parts. Just like Sterling's original compass rose logo, with its hidden hearts that his wife had designed. Just like Sarah's snowflakes, teaching Emma that love leaves marks that last beyond our time. He wrote one final note at the top of his plan. Every person has a story. Every story matters. Our job is to listen, understand, and help write better endings. Tomorrow would bring Christmas celebrations and new family connections. But the day after that, the real work would begin, transforming Meridian into the kind of company that measured success not in quarterly reports, but in lives touched and communities strengthened. It wouldn't be easy. Some board members would resist. Change never was simple. But as James looked at his daughter's family-found snowflake, he knew that the most worthwhile things rarely were. Michael Sterling stood in the toy store, feeling oddly out of place in his expensive suit. Around him, last-minute shoppers hurried through the aisles, but he moved slowly, trying to remember what his grandchildren liked. How had he become so disconnected that he didn't even know their current interests? "Can I help you find something?" A sales clerk approached, her name tag reading, Jenny. "I'm shopping for my grandchildren," he admitted. "They're flying in tomorrow, and I haven't seen them in a while." Jenny's eyes softened with understanding. "How old are they?" "Charlotte is 8, like Emma." He paused, realizing he'd been thinking of Connor's daughter. "And Thomas is 6. Follow me." Jenny led him through the aisles. 8-year-old girls are usually interested in creative activities, art supplies, craft kits. Sterling thought of Emma's careful paper snowflakes. Yes, something like that. And games they could play together maybe? Things that bring people closer. Soon he had a cart full of carefully chosen items. Art supplies, board games, building sets that required cooperation. Things that created connections, not just entertainment. At the register, Jenny rang up his purchases. "Your grandchildren are lucky to have a grandfather who puts so much thought into their gifts." "I'm trying to make up for lost time," he said, quietly. Outside the store, snow was falling again. Sterling paused to watch it, remembering how Emma had described snowflakes in her presentation, each one unique, part of a larger pattern, like people, like families. His next stop was a small bookstore. The elderly owner looked up as the bell chimed. "We're about to close, but—" Her eyes widened. Mr. Sterling, he recognized her, Margaret Chen, Mr. Chen's wife. Another connection. In the web of community he'd been rediscovering. "Please, just Michael tonight. I'm looking for children's books, the kinds that families can read together." Mrs. Chen's face lit up. "Ah, stories that build bridges. Follow me." She selected books thoughtfully. Tales of family bonds, of traditions kept and renewed, of love that spans distances. These were Claire's favorites, she said, pulling out a worn copy of A Christmas Story. Sterling stared at her. "You remember?" "Of course. She used to read in the corner while you talked business with my husband. Before the company grew so big." She added the book to his stack. "It's good to see you remembering those days." His final stop was the grocery store, where he filled a cart with ingredients for tomorrow's breakfast. French toast supplies, remembering. James's mention of Sarah's recipe, fresh fruit, good coffee, things that would make their shared meals special. The young cashier looked tired, probably nearing the end of a long Christmas Eve shift. Sterling thought of all the times he'd ignored such details before his time as John. "You look like you could use a break," he said, pulling out his wallet. "When does your shift end?" "Another hour," she sighed. Missing Christmas Eve with my kids, but we needed the extra money. Sterling made a mental note. Meridian's new policies would include better holiday pay, more flexible scheduling for parents. Small changes that could make big differences. Here, he handed her an extra $100 with his payment. Merry Christmas. Get something special for your children. Her eyes filled with tears. Sir, I couldn't. Please, consider it practice for my new role as a grandfather who needs to make up for lost time. Driving home through the snowy streets, Sterling passed the spot where he'd spent 2 months as John. The sidewalk was empty now, but he could almost see himself there, learning the lessons he'd needed most. His phone buzzed. Another text from Claire. Just landed in Amsterdam for our connection. Thomas is excited about making snowflakes. Charlotte wants to know if we can bake cookies. Papa, are you sure you want us to stay with you? We could get a hotel. No hotels, he typed back. I've missed too much already. It's time to build something new together. Christmas morning dawned clear and bright, the fresh snow glittering like diamonds in the early light. James and Emma were already up, their small kitchen filled with the scent of vanilla and cinnamon as they prepared Sarah's French toast recipe. Do you think we made enough batter? Emma asked, carefully measuring ingredients like her mother had taught her. There's going to be lots of people. Before James could answer, a knock at the door announced their first guests. Claire Sterling stood there, jet-lagged but smiling, with 2 sleepy children and her father behind her. I hope we're not too early, she said. The kids couldn't wait to meet Emma. They haven't stopped talking about her snowflakes since Papa told us the story. Emma shyly approached her new friends. Charlotte, also 8, immediately noticed the art supplies on the table. Are those for making snowflakes? Papa said you could teach us. I brought hot chocolate, Michael added, holding up a thermos. The same kind we used to share, James, though this time I didn't have to pretend it was a luxury. Soon the apartment was filled with happy chaos. Emma showed Charlotte and Thomas how to fold and cut the paper just so, while Claire joined James at the stove, insisting on helping with the French toast. Papa told me about Sarah's recipe, she said softly, about all the traditions you've kept alive for Emma. It reminded him of how Maman used to make Christmas special for me. Before, she trailed off, but James understood. Loss had shaped both their families, but here they were, building something new from the pieces. Sterling watched his grandchildren learning Emma's snowflake technique, his eyes bright with unshed tears. I'd forgotten, he murmured. Claire used to make paper crafts with her mother. Every Christmas then it's time to remember, James said, and create new memories too. More guests arrived throughout the morning. Mr. and Mrs. Chen brought fresh pastries. Martinez stopped by with his family. Ms. Rodriguez appeared with more vintage ornaments she'd discovered in her attic. The apartment should have felt crowded, but somehow it just felt right. Emma and Charlotte worked together to teach Thomas the art of snowflake making, their heads bent close in concentration. Claire shared stories about growing up in Paris, while Sterling listened with the same careful attention he'd shown as John. Look, Papa, Charlotte held up her creation. I put tiny hearts in it, like Emma showed me. Sterling examined the snowflake, touching the delicate patterns, just like your grandmother used to do in her designs. Did you know she put hidden hearts in Meridian's first logo? Really? Both girls crowded around as Sterling pulled out his old business card, showing them the compass rose design. Soon they were incorporating compass points into their snowflakes, creating a new pattern that merged both family traditions. Mom would have loved this, Emma said, watching their growing collection of snowflakes catch the morning light. She always said traditions are best when they're shared. James looked around his transformed apartment, at the children teaching each other family crafts, at the adults sharing stories and laughter, at the way Sterling kept glancing at his daughter and grandchildren as if hardly daring to believe. They were really there. Sometimes the best gifts, he thought, came wrapped not in paper, but in moments like these, in second chances and new beginnings, in the way life could take broken pieces and help you build something even more beautiful than before. While the children continued crafting snowflakes, Claire drew her father aside to the small balcony. The morning sun caught the fresh snow, making the city sparkle beneath them. "Papa," she said softly, using the name she'd abandoned years ago. "Tell me about these past 2 months. About being John." Sterling leaned against the railing, watching his breath mist in the cold air. "After your last email, about not recognizing the company anymore, about me losing my way, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about your mother, about how disappointed she would have been." Claire touched his arm gently. "Maman would have understood grief, Papa. She just wouldn't have wanted it to change you so completely. I thought I was honoring her legacy by making the company more profitable, more efficient." He smiled ruefully. "I forgot that she designed our first logo with hidden hearts because she believed business should have a heart too." Through the window, they could see Emma teaching Thomas a special snowflake fold, her patience matching Sarah's in James's stories. "The first morning I sat outside Meridian as John, James Connor shared his breakfast without hesitation. He had so little, but he gave without question. It reminded me of how your mother used to cook extra every Sunday to feed the homeless shelter." Claire wiped away a tear. "I remember. We used to help her deliver the meals. Watching James with Emma, seeing how he kept his wife's traditions alive even when it hurt. It showed me what I'd been doing wrong. I wasn't honoring your mother's memory by burying myself in work. I was hiding from it." Inside, Charlotte had just completed a complex snowflake pattern. Her delighted laugh carried through the glass, making Claire smile. "That's why you invited them to share Christmas, because they helped you remember." Sterling shook his head. "No, because they helped me see what's possible when you choose love over loss." James could have become bitter, focused only on survival. Instead, he taught his daughter that sharing what little you have makes life richer. He turned to face his daughter fully. "I'm sorry, Claire, for all the birthdays I missed, the school events, the times you needed your father and got a CEO instead." "Papa," Claire's voice broke. "When I sat on that sidewalk, I saw so many parents rushing to school events, making time despite their busy schedules. It made me remember when you were young, how I used to take you to the office on Saturdays. You'd draw while I worked. The art wall," Claire remembered. "All the employees would hang their children's pictures too. James's daughter has the same creative spirit you had, the same way of seeing beauty in simple things. Watching her today, teaching my grandchildren," he paused, emotion making his voice rough. "It's like being given a second chance to get things right." Claire hugged him then, breathing in the familiar scent of his aftershave, the same brand he'd worn throughout her childhood. "It's never too late, Papa. That's what you learned from them, isn't it? That love and tradition and family, they're always waiting for us to remember their value." Through the window they could see James, showing Charlotte how to make Sarah's French toast, teaching her the same gentle patience he used with Emma. A family expanded, not by blood, but by understanding. "Your mother would have loved them," Sterling said softly. "She would have seen what I finally saw, that true wealth isn't in what we have, but in what we share." The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the paper snowflakes hanging in James's windows, creating patterns that danced across the living room floor. Emma and Charlotte had become inseparable, their heads bent together over a new art project, while Thomas napped on the couch, clutching one of his handmade snowflakes. "They look like they've known each other forever," Claire remarked, helping James prepare Christmas dinner in the kitchen. "Children have such open hearts." "Emma's been asking for a sister since she was 4, James said, smiling as he watched. "The girls. Sarah used to say—" He paused, realizing he was about to share something personal. "Please," Claire encouraged. "Tell us about her." "She used to say that family isn't about blood. It's about who makes your heart feel at home." Sterling, who had been quietly observing from his spot near the window, nodded. "Your wife sounds like she and my Catherine would have gotten along well. She had the same philosophy about Meridian, that a company should be a family, not just A business. The apartment had transformed throughout the day. Emma's paper snowflakes now hung alongside vintage ornaments from Ms. Rodriguez. Mr. Chen had brought traditional Chinese decorations, explaining their meanings to the children. Martinez's wife had added her family's hand-embroidered Christmas stockings to the display. "Look what we made!" Emma called out, holding up a new creation. She and Charlotte had designed a special snowflake that combined elements from both families. Sarah's hidden hearts, Catherine's compass points, and a new pattern all their own. "It's for both our moms," Charlotte explained, "since they're both watching over us now." The adults fell quiet, moved by the children's simple wisdom. Claire wiped away a tear while Sterling squeezed her shoulder gently. "Can we hang it in the middle?" Emma asked, "so it catches the most light?" James lifted both girls up, one in each arm, so they could place their creation in the perfect spot. The snowflake caught the sunlight, casting a pattern that seemed to embrace the whole room. "You know," Sterling said thoughtfully, "this reminds me of something Catherine used to say about patterns, how the most beautiful ones come from different elements working together." "Like your company logo?" Charlotte asked. "Exactly. And like this Christmas, different families, different traditions, all coming together to make something new." The doorbell rang again, more visitors arriving. Ms. Rodriguez brought her famous tamales, a Christmas tradition from her own family. The Chens arrived with traditional rice cakes. Martinez's family brought their grandmother's special hot chocolate recipe. The small apartment should have felt crowded, but somehow it just felt right. Children played together while adults shared stories and food. Different languages and traditions mixed naturally, creating a tapestry of community and connection. "This is what Meridian should be," Sterling said quietly to James. "Not just a business, but a catalyst for bringing people together, for helping families grow stronger." James watched as Emma taught Thomas how to make a simple paper star, showing the same patience Sarah had always shown when teaching. "That's what we'll build together," he replied, starting with the Sarah Connor Memorial Fund. "And the Catherine Sterling Arts Program," Claire added, joining them, "supporting children's creativity in schools that can't afford art classes." Outside, snow began falling again, adding nature's own decorations to their Christmas celebration. Emma and Charlotte pressed their faces to the window, watching the flakes dance. "Look!" Emma pointed excitedly. "They're making patterns just like ours." "Because everything's connected," Charlotte said wisely. "That's what Daddy learned when he was being John, right?" Sterling laughed, a sound full of joy and healing. "Yes, that's exactly what I learned, that we're all connected, all part of a bigger pattern. We just have to remember to look for the hearts hidden in the design." As evening approached, the gathering began to take on a deeper meaning. Mr. Chen brought out a camera, insisting on capturing the moment. "For next year's comparison," he said with a knowing smile, "when the family will be even bigger." The word family struck a chord. Looking around the room, James realized that's exactly what had formed here. Not just his small unit of two, or the Sterlings reuniting, but something larger, something that encompassed all of them. Emma and Charlotte were teaching Thomas how to make paper chains for next year's tree, their heads bent together in concentration. "See," Emma explained, "each link makes the whole chain stronger, just like people," Charlotte added, wise beyond her years. "That's what Grandpa learned when he was being John, right?" Sterling, overhearing, joined them on the floor. "That's exactly right. Every person adds strength to the chain. Every act of kindness makes the pattern more beautiful." Claire watched her father sit cross-legged with the children, tears in her eyes. "I never thought I'd see him like this again," she whispered to James. "After Maman died, he just disappeared into his work. But now, sometimes," James said, thinking of his own journey with Sarah's memory, "we have to lose our way to find a better path." Ms. Rodriguez began gathering the day's artistic creations, carefully preserving each one. "For the new Meridian lobby," she explained, "if we're going to talk about building tomorrow through people, we should show what that really means." The idea caught fire. Martinez suggested a weekly art program for employees' children. Susan from payroll offered to organize a community outreach committee. Even Bill Hayes, stopping by with his family, proposed expanding the Sarah Connor Memorial Fund to include educational support for employees' children. "It's happening already," Sterling observed quietly to James. "The change we talked about. People just needed permission to care again." Emma tugged at James's sleeve. "Daddy, can we do this every Christmas, with everyone?" Before he could answer, Charlotte chimed in. "Please, Papa. Emma said we could make it a tradition." The two men exchanged glances, seeing in each other the same understanding. Some traditions were meant to grow, to expand, to embrace more love and more family. "Of course we can," they answered together. As if to seal the promise, the children created one final snowflake together, their masterpiece of the day. In its intricate pattern, they incorporated elements from everyone present: hearts for Sarah, compass points for Catherine, stars for Ms. Rodriguez's ornaments, circles for Mr. Chen's lanterns, and new designs of their own creation. "For all of us," Emma declared, hanging it in the center of the window, "because we're all part of the pattern now." The setting sun caught the paper creation, casting a shadow that seemed to embrace the entire room. In that moment, watching the unified design dance across the walls, everyone understood what Sterling had learned during his time as John, that the truest measure of wealth isn't in what you possess, but in the hearts you touch and the lives you transform. 1 year later, the lobby of Meridian Enterprises looked very different. Gone were the cold marble walls and impersonal corporate art. Instead, paper snowflakes danced from the ceiling, each one created by an employee's child. A large display case held the original snowflakes from that transformative Christmas, carefully preserved as a reminder of where the change began. James stood in front of the case, straightening his tie before heading to his morning meeting. The Sarah Connor Memorial Fund had helped over 200 families in its first year. Beside it, the Catherine Sterling Arts Program had brought creativity back into schools that had lost their funding. "Good morning, Director Connor," Martinez called from his security desk, where he now ran the company's community outreach program alongside his regular duties. "Morning, Martinez. How's the holiday giving program coming along?" "Better than expected. Employees have already adopted twice as many families as last year." The elevator ride to the executive floor felt different now. Photos of employees' families lined the walls, mixed with children's artwork and community project highlights. Sterling had insisted on making the changes permanent, a daily reminder of what mattered most. In the conference room, Emma and Charlotte's joint snowflake design had been incorporated into the company's new logo. The hidden hearts and compass points now represented Meridian's dual mission: guidance and compassion, business and humanity, working in harmony. "James!" Sterling entered, no longer the isolated CEO, but a man transformed. He'd moved into a smaller office, converting his old executive suite into a daycare center for employees' children. "Ready for the board presentation?" "All set. The numbers actually look better than last year." Sterling smiled. "Turns out taking care of people is good for business." "Who knew?" They shared a knowing look, both remembering those morning conversations on the sidewalk. Every Christmas Eve since then, Sterling still brought coffee and bagels to share with the homeless outside Meridian's doors. But now he wasn't alone. Employees and their families had joined the tradition, creating a community celebration that touched hundreds of lives. Claire had moved back to Chicago with her family, heading the Catherine Sterling Arts Program. Every weekend, the old building filled with children learning to create, to share, to see the patterns that connected them all. Emma and Charlotte had become inseparable, their friendship spreading to include other employees' children. Their after-school art club now decorated the lobby seasonally, keeping the spirit of those first Christmas snowflakes alive all year round. "By the way," Sterling said, pulling out his phone, "Mr. Chen sent me this." The photo showed their expanded family at last year's Christmas gathering. James and Emma, Sterling and Claire with her children, the Chens, Martinez's family, Ms. Rodriguez, and dozens more. Paper snowflakes and traditional decorations from multiple cultures created a backdrop that celebrated their differences while highlighting their connections. "This year's gathering will be even bigger," James said. "Emma and Charlotte have been planning it for months." "Speaking of planning," Sterling's eyes twinkled. "Have you asked Ms. Rodriguez to dinner yet?" James felt his face warm. The young teacher had become a regular part of their extended family, her gentle understanding of Emma and passion for helping children fitting perfectly into their expanding circle. "This weekend," he admitted. "Emma's idea, actually. She said it's time for our pattern to grow again." Outside the window, snow began to fall, real snowflakes dancing in the winter wind, each one unique, each one part of something larger, just like the people inside Meridian Enterprises, who had learned that the greatest wealth comes not from what you gather, but from what you share. A small paper snowflake fluttered on Sterling's desk, the last one Sarah had made, preserved under glass. Beside it stood a photo of Catherine at the company's founding, her compass rose design prominent in the background. Two women who had never met, whose legacy of love had transformed not just their families, but an entire community. Because sometimes the smallest acts of kindness, like sharing breakfast with a stranger or teaching a child to make paper snowflakes, can create patterns more beautiful than we could ever imagine.